History remembers Hitler for many things. A failed artist, his love for German shepherds, being a Nazi dickhead. Yeah, it's mostly the Nazi dickhead thing. But one thing you might be surprised to learn about Hitler is that he was actually one of the wealthiest men of his time. And no, not just because of all that stolen Nazi gold and loot gathered from all across Europe, but because of his own shrewd business skills. Young Hitler lived a bohemian lifestyle before it was cool, making him the ultimate mass-murdering hipster. He rented a small apartment in Vienna with a friend and struggled to get by selling small paintings and postcards to tourists. After being rejected from art school twice, Hitler was soon out on the street, all of his funds having run out. After World War I, Hitler had become involved in German politics and famously took part in the failed beer hall putsch of 1923. As a result, he was sentenced to prison for 5 years, and to help pay off his legal fees, he dictated what would become Mein Kampf to 2 of his cellmates. Hitler imagined that the book would be popular amongst the National Socialist Party and had no big dreams of making it as a writer. All he needed was a few thousand people to buy the book so that he could pay off his legal fees. And in 1925, the first year of its publication, Mein Kampf sold 9,000 copies. While this certainly helped pay for his legal fees, Hitler would see no royalties from these meager sales. However, as Hitler began to rise along the ranks of the National Socialist Party, so did his exposure as an author. More and more party members and even some curious members of the public wanted to know what this mustachioed young man was all about, and copies of Mein Kampf slowly began to increase in sales. By 1930, Mein Kampf had managed to sell 55,000 copies in a single year, and by this time Hitler was receiving decent, if not impressive, royalty checks from his publisher. Once Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, though, book sales of Mein Kampf exploded, and in 1933, the year he took power, sales skyrocketed to over 850,000. Needless to say, Hitler was now pulling in rather large royalty checks. Thanks to his massive personality cult and the fact that he ruled Germany unchecked, Hitler decided that the best way to boost sales of his book even further was to have the government itself buy copies. Therefore, the Nazi government immediately bought 6 million copies of his book, and copies were being provided to soldiers and government workers alike. Even married couples received a free copy on their wedding day, as a very weird congratulatory present from the Nazi government. But as Hitler became more popular, or infamous depending on your take, the world at large grew curious about the Nazi author. Internationally, Hitler earned royalties on the sale of his book up until 1939, when he was declared an enemy of the Allies and had all international royalties cut off. Granted, he was never earning nearly as much internationally as domestically, but he was still pulling in $560,000 in royalties from sales in Britain and about $50,000 in royalties from sales in the US. During the war, his book would continue to sell in the US, though the US government seized control of publishing royalties by invoking the Trading with the Enemy Act and ended up giving $260,000 in royalties to war refugee charities. While Hitler was trying to kill people, ironically, his book was helping those same people. At his height, Hitler was earning about $13.5 million a year from book sales in today's dollars, which would be far more impressive if he wasn't basically forcing the Nazi government to simply buy his book. All those sales, though, had accumulated to a $10 million tax bill, which Hitler simply ordered one of his ministers to forgive. We gotta admit, sometimes it pays to be on top. Literally. In total, Hitler would earn a whopping $170 million in today's dollars just by selling copies of Mein Kampf. All this money was used to buy several very expensive properties around Germany, though Hitler also used a great deal of his own personal fortune to fund the Nazi Party. He even made one of his homes, the Berghof, into the main headquarters of the Nazi Party. Sadly, when the British tried to bomb it back to the Stone Age, their bombs largely missed and only managed to slightly damage it. Hitler, however, used his political power to enrich himself with one more other cunning ploy. He licensed his image to the German government and then ordered that it be used basically everywhere. From posters to stamps to the covers of propaganda magazines and books, Hitler's face was everywhere all across the German nation, and every time his face was printed on anything, Hitler got a cut thanks to licensing fees. Given that Hitler was the one ordering the creation of all this propaganda material, we once more have to admit that this is a pretty pro-supervillain move. Taking over a country and ruling it like a dictator is one thing, but selling your image to your own government and then forcing it to print it everywhere is on a whole other level of villainy. Then, of course, there is all the untold stolen wealth of Europe that the Nazis, quote, liberated as they invaded nations. By the end of the war, the Nazis had stolen a whopping $21 billion in gold, And it was this stolen gold that helped entirely fund the German war machine for 5 whole years. As supreme ruler of Germany, whatever the state owned was basically Hitler's personal wealth as well, though the Allies made sure that he spent every stolen cent on the war effort, lest his forces be defeated sooner than they eventually were. Still, with the largest gold reserves in the world for a short while, Hitler was likely one of history's richest rulers, if only briefly. Today, Mein Kampf continues to sell copies. Physical copies of the book are understandably very rare, as most people don't want to be caught in public reading Mein Kampf. Yet, thanks to digital readers like Kindle, digital sales of Mein Kampf have exploded around the world. Part of this is due to sheer curiosity, and in some parts of the world who have learned very little about Hitler and his role in World War II, Mein Kampf and anything Hitler related is actually seen as trendy, hip, and cool. This is especially true in Southeast Asia, with Thailand in love with anything Hitler related. Again, this is mostly due to the fact that Thai citizens learned very little about Hitler's role in World War II, and for them he's apparently nothing more than a snazzy dresser with a funny mustache. A rise in anti-Semitism and nationalism, however, has also seen sales of Mein Kampf increase in the last few years, and that's rather unfortunate for the rest of us non-Nazi dickheads. Ironically though, because no publisher wants to be associated with Hitler and his book, or seen as enriching themselves from Nazi trash, the vast majority of all money made from the sales of the book are funneled straight into various charities. So while white supremacists are buying up Mein Kampf and hating on Jews and other minorities, they're actually helping fund a ton of charities that help those groups of people and others out. Thanks, idiots! After Hitler's death, what remained of his wealth and ongoing royalties from Mein Kampf went to one of Hitler's surviving cousins, who flatly refused them and did not wish to be associated with one of history's greatest villains. Instead, those funds were channeled to various charities and post-war reconstruction efforts. The same goes for sales of his early artwork, with no dealers wanting to be associated with Hitler, and sales largely taking place between private sellers and collectors. In the end, Hitler may have been one of the most evil men to ever live, but ironically, he would end up defeating himself as his wealth continues to this day to be used for causes that would likely make him turn over in his grave. Should Mein Kampf simply be banned outright? Let us know in the comments, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content.